Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast.
Welcome to Plates and Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Brandon Herring. Coach Herring began coaching college football in 2000 at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, where he stayed for 6 years before moving to Samford University, where he was the co-offensive coordinator and offensive line coach. He began coaching at high school in 2015, where he's been a strength and conditioning coach, offensive coordinator, and head coach. He transitioned to a full-time strength and conditioning coach at Hewitt-Trussville High School, where he also serves as the Alabama NHSSCA State Director. In 2022, Coach Herring was named the NHSSCA Coach of the Year. So welcome to the show, Coach.
I appreciate you having me. Thanks.
I appreciate you taking some time. I know it's really busy this time of year for strength and conditioning coaches, so I appreciate it.
What time of year isn't busy for a strength and conditioning coach?
There's a lot of truth to that, so anytime somebody makes time to come on the show is pretty important to me. Like I read there, you were in the college level for quite a while. So when you made the move from college to high school, what were some of the harder things you had to deal with to get used to the transition?
Oh boy. Well, I'd never taught school before, and all that blew my mind. I mean, people don't really think about it that way, but it was a complete career change, right? I moved my family. I had to go back to college. I had two kids. One was in fifth grade, I think, at that time. One was in second grade. I had to go back to college, teaching school, just dealing with that whole dynamic as far as being in a school setting with, principal and all that. And then, so that was wild, and it was stressful a little bit. Then, the football part of it, of course there's differences, and people ask me, would you ever go back? And, football's football. I mean, I don't care how old, and I've done everything from, ninth graders up to, seniors in college, and the game is the game. Now, the level of athlete that you're dealing with as a whole is a little different. Maybe some of the things, like when I was at Samford, I had some really intelligent kids there, and you could do a lot of things with them mentally because they could handle it, But then I've been in situations where that wasn't the case, and so you always have to coach your kids. The differentiation is a big word in school, and it's a huge word in strength and conditioning. You always got to meet your athletes where they are. So the game is the game. I'll be honest with you. The biggest adjustment I had to get used to was the hashes. People don't think about that. The hashes are so wide in high school. I remember the first day, I'd spent all this time when as soon as I got there, our wide receiver coach was a young guy, and I could tell he was a go-getter and wanted to be really good. So I leaned on him, and he was wanting to learn and all that. And very first day we walked outside and got on the field, I realized every one of our receiver splits was jacked up because I did everything off of the hash and the numbers. And I get out there and we were spread all over. We looked like Baylor, all over the place. And so that was an adjustment. But the game is the game. It's fun to coach, no matter where you are.
Now, taking that a little deeper, I guess. So what were some of the challenges you had moving from a sport coach into a weight room?
Well, when I took my first high school job, as soon as they did the board okayed me or whatever, that night, actually, the head coach, I didn't even know what I was going to be doing. I knew I was going to work there, the head coach, I had known Alan for a long time. I recruited there and all that. And that night he said, "Oh yeah, so basically you're going to be running the weight room." And I was like, Wait a minute, what are you talking about?" I thought I was just going to do PE or something like that. And so sure enough, I have to do the weight room, and I got no idea what I'm doing. I'd always enjoyed lifting weights, but I mean, there's a huge divide there, and I'm a guy that if I'm going to do something, I want to do it right. And I just started well, first thing I did was Ryan Davis, who's at Maryland with Maryland football right now, was our strength coach at Samford at the time when I left there. And I called RD and I was like, you got to help me, So he came to the house, and then we spent some time and that kind of thing. But I still didn't have any idea what I was doing. And then I just started diving into it, man. Reading books, watching videos, going to visit people, and because the football part was not an issue for me, right? I mean, I could coach football with my eyes closed. So I started kind of diving into it, and ended up just kind of falling in love with it, man. I really, really liked it. I've said this before. I'm an old offensive line coach. I think offensive line coaches can make really good strength coaches. Um, there's a there's a real similarity in the way you have to coach the offensive line and strength and conditioning. There's a lot of monotony, right? There's doing things over and over again, trying to achieve perfection. And somebody that doesn't understand coaching offensive line, one angle of the foot can put you off with what you're doing, and it's just got to be a repetitive thing over and over and over again. Well, there's a lot of coaches that go in the weight room. Maybe a sport coach, they go in the weight room and they get bored real quick. It's like, how many times can I watch this girl squat? But that's where I think offensive line coaches, they master the monotony, and so I think they can be pretty good with it. And I guess it just fitted in with me, and I just fell in love with it. I think maybe it was a little bit of a breath of fresh air, because I could have an impact on every kid, not just my position group. And when I came to Trussville, I started doing, I was doing the strength here, and I was coaching. And then I really started getting into it, started doing more and more things in our program, and our head coach. And, he liked the direction we were going with speed training and those kind of things. And he and I sat down and talked, and, I said, what do you think about me just doing strength? And he was like, will it help you? And I said, yes. And so the rest is history. I'm just a strength coach now. So,
coming from where you came from, you got thrown into this, you had to study and you had to learn how you wanted to teach them. You also were probably still learning the classroom environment of your new school. How were you able to get everything organized and get everything to take off?
well, there's a couple of different areas there. You got to make sure that you have classroom management. I don't think that was a real big issue for me. Now, I'll be honest with you. I've had to go and sit in classes, maybe to watch somebody's class that, teacher had an emergency, and I'm a fish out of water in a classroom now, but in the chaos of a weight room, I was good with it, and I think what I had going for me is I was a coach. The one thing I can do is I can coach. There's a lot better strength coaches that have a heck of a lot more knowledge than me, and experience and all that. But the one thing I can do, and I'm confident in, is coaching. I can teach, I can motivate, I can hold a standard without wavering from it. So I already had that kind of going for me. So I don't think the classroom management piece of it was that big a deal. Now, I did have to get used to the high school student. That was a little bit different. There's a different maturity level, and there's a different commitment level, and those kind of things. Then, really, I think as far as like programming and those kind of things, Joe King in the tier system really got me organized in a major way. And I know I've since somehow Joe and I've become pretty good friends. And I tell people all the time, I have, coaches that come here and visit and those kind of things. And when I can tell that they may just be a sport coach that's trying to figure it out as well, hey, go get Joe's book, and it will set you on the right path. And I still loosely broke. I can't say. I hope Joe don't hear this because he'll get mad. I loosely program on the tier system. It's always in my mind. Just the way he does things, the way he organizes things, and all that. But as I've gotten more experience, I've kind of got my own flair on things and all that. But Joe, his the tier system got me on the path. I really believe that if no matter what, if you learn the tier system, you can program safely and efficiently for a team. And so if a sport coach is listening to this and you're trying to figure out, go get the book. And because there's nothing worse. I remember when I was trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to do? My first time programming. What are we doing? And you're almost throwing stuff against the wall and just seeing what sticks. And the tier system will get you on the right path. And so shout out to Joe for that.
Well, the next thing that would come in off that is now you've learned a program. Everybody wants to track something. You want to keep track of what your athletes are doing, see where your progress is, see where it's not. You have huge rooms, so you can't track every little thing that they do. What did you finally land on that you wanted to track?
Well, with that, I rely on some of our coaches to help me. I also rely on the kids themselves. I've built a trust relationship with them in that, for instance, our jump stuff, we've got a couple of plow mats, and they enter their own jumps into a couple of iPads there. And I have Rock Daisy's software, so every kid has their own, their own place in there, and so it'll automatically, put their information in with their name and all those kind of things. Well, I've built it into where they can enter that themselves, and and I've built that trust with them that, look, line doesn't help you, that doesn't help me tell whether what I'm doing with you is actually working. So put the real number in there and those kind of things. Our coaches will help with some of that kind of thing as well. Our linebackers coach is kind of my assistant with football. And he helps me a whole lot with speed training and entering data and that kind of thing with that. And then weight room numbers. A lot of times what I do with that, instead of them, and I can, what I've done up until I got Rock Daisy, now if they set a new training max, then they can actually enter that into Rock Daisy as well. So as long as I have it pulled up on the iPad, they just click on their name and they enter the number, boom, it just goes in there. Well, what I did prior to that is I had, it's actually one of these sheets right here. This is from speed training today. So it's just my roster. And I would, if we were doing, some heavy singles on whatever, bench press, squat, or whatever, I got a clipboard in there. And if they hit above their training max, then they write it down beside their number, what the number was, and I enter all that in, right? So now that I have the Rock Daisy, it makes it a lot simpler. They can kind of do it all themselves. But I still, with the way I'm set up, I still go back and input that in another place because I keep up with some of that stuff in another place. But it's pretty streamlined. It's pretty efficient. And Rock Daisy does a great job of letting me pull up, whatever I want. There's a lot of dashboards inside of it, and saves me a whole bunch of time.
Yeah, and I'm sure any minute you can save, somebody else needs it from you. So having the software, having the kids be honest has got to make your day go better.
No doubt.
Now, obviously, you pick up on biomechanics in the weight room and what works and what doesn't work. So being around the biomechanics side more, how has that changed maybe the way that you viewed coaching?
Oh boy, I say this and I 100% believe it. If I went back and I coached football or something else, first of all, I think if you're a good coach, you can coach any sport. I really believe that. If you can coach, you can coach. You just got to learn the material. But I really believe if I went back and coached football, I'd be 100 times better coach right now. Sometimes I got to be careful because I make people mad with this. I actually spoke at a couple of football clinics in winter and spring of this year, and I covered some things and basically told them you're teaching things wrong. You're coaching kids to do things that they physically can't do. I think a lot of coaches, they know what they want, they don't know how to get it right. And so I think that's where, if you're a sport coach, listen to this, go sit down with a strength coach and talk to them about biomechanics. Speaking, strictly from an offensive line perspective, I've grown up and learned from. I've been to 1,000 clinics. I've talked to 1,000,000 strength coaches or offensive line coaches, and for the most part, people teach things generally the same way. Um, but in a lot of cases, you're asking kids to do something physically that the human body can't do, and I don't think they really get that. So, for instance, here's the thing. So, a big thing with an offensive lineman is keeping their pads down, right? Everybody's heard that. Get your gear down, keep your pads down. At the same time, they also tell them to roll or snap their hips. So I think a coach understands that working the hip extension, you're producing power, right? So I think everybody understands that. But the problem is, you can't keep your pads down and roll your hips all at the same time. It's not physically possible. As soon as your hips go into extension, you go into knee extension, hip extension, your shoulders are going to go up. They have to. There's nowhere else for them to go. So the question becomes, is rolling your hips bad? Not necessarily, but don't coach it to happen. If it happens, either something real good's happening, meaning they're rolling somebody up, or something real bad's happening, meaning they've got to anchor down. They have got to try to stop onward pressure from them, right? But you don't have to coach them into it. And one way I'll tell them about that, or I'll explain it to them, is go up to a truck in the parking lot and push the truck. You're going to start pushing from a loaded position. So think about the power clean, coach. You don't get in a power clean extended. You're going to get in that power position. Why? Because you can produce force right there. Why are you coaching them to get out of that? Leave them in it for as long as possible, and then if they get into extension, something good's probably happening. So those are the kind of things I think that I would be much better at. And I've actually texted some of my former players and apologized to them and said, "Man, I was a bad coach. I'm sorry." So I think I could be better if I went back, no doubt.
So now, like you said, if you're a good coach and you have the desire, you can coach about any sport you want if you learn the material. So learning the sport demands so that you can help the high school athlete become the best athlete they can be. How have you developed that since you've moved into the role?
Go watch practice. Go watch them play. Go watch them practice. Listen and talk to the coach. That's one thing. Develop a relationship with the sport coach. Strength coaches like to complain a lot about coaches. Coaches doing whatever, saying, I don't want worried about them being tired or whatever from the weight room. Well, that's your fault. Go build a relationship with them and talk to them. And if they trust you, then they trust you. Like our head coach in football, our head coach in softball, they don't question me at all. If because I've built enough trust in them that if I say that we need to do something or we don't need to do something, they don't really question me. As long as I can produce a why, then there's no problem there. And I've got a great thing going in that I've got full autonomy over our programs. Our coaches trust me to do what I think it's best to help our kids maximize their potential. So go build a relationship with a coach. Ask them what they need. What do you, and that's, I've got a clipboard sitting right here. We won in softball. We won the state championship on Saturday, and on Monday, I had a meeting with our head coach, and we sat down and we went through the entire roster and of returning girls. So 2 days after we won the state championship, I was sitting down with our head coach, and I got a team-wide kind of philosophy of where she thought our team would be when we come back. And individually, we talked about girls and what they need to be better at. And so I had that immediately, and but that also shows you 2 days after winning a state championship, she's ready to do whatever it takes to help our girls be as good as they can be, the next year. And I think she appreciates, sitting down and talking like that. A football coach is the same way. I think I don't have to do it quite as much with him because he knows my background and he knows I know football. I think he sees or he knows that I know what these kids need just because of my background a little bit. But Taylor and I have a great relationship, and she trusts me with that. So there's a lot of things you can do. You just got to be willing to do it. If you don't have a lot of knowledge of soccer, go watch them practice, go watch them play, and you can see what the demands of the game are, and then you kind of have an idea what you need to do.
Now you kind of led into where I was heading, but obviously softball is huge down there. You guys have won multiple state championships. You've sent multiple girls to play on to the next level. So when you were getting acclimated with that sport and trying to figure out how to help the softball coach build the athletes she needed, what stuck out to you that needed the most improvement?
Well, we got really good players here, so it makes it fun. Uh, you kind of said that we've sent a lot to college, a lot to college. 2 years ago, uh, we had 10 sign off of one team. So all 9 starters, and we had 2 catchers that actually signed. They just basically every game they would kind of split time behind the plate. So really good players makes that a little bit easier. But I think, to be honest with you, last year we played for the state championship and lost, or I guess it was year before last. But I told Taylor after the state championship game, we got all the way down to the last game. I told her, I said, "This is your best coaching job," and she had already won several, championships up to that point, and she said, "I believe it is too," because that team was not as talented, and they just kind of willed themselves to the state championship. I mean, there is a standard here, and there is an expectation that anything less than a blue map, which is our state championship trophy, is not it's not what we're looking for. And those girls pretty much just willed themselves to the game. And then this year's team, we weren't quite sure about this team. We're young. We only had 4 seniors, and um, so our team was young. Now we knew we were talented, but it was a little bit of an unknown, and it didn't start out so good. And then after one game, they team sat down. They had a heart to heart, and then after that, it was just an onslaught. They went off and ended up winning the state championship. And so we only had 4 seniors on that team. So the majority of that team's coming back this year. So I think we got a chance to be all right. But I think Taylor wanted, because look, the 2019, 2020, 21 teams were just stupid, stacked with hitters. Our 1 through 6 could tank one. You couldn't pitch around anybody. And then in 22, a lot of those girls had left, and the dynamic of the team started changing just a little bit. We were a little faster this past year that we won it. Going into it, as I sat down with Taylor, she was like, "I think we're going to play a little bit different this year. We're going to have to, bunt, squeeze, steal bases. We're not just going to crank bombs like we have the last several years." And so we focused a lot on speed training, which we do anyway, but we did think we had our 1 through 5 could really, really run. And then we having said that, when you've got that type of kid, they also need to get stronger. And the girls just bought in, and they took their strength training to a whole new level. And we ended up hitting 63 bombs, I think, 63 home runs on the season this past year, which is way and above what Taylor thought would be achievable. But the girls bought in, they got strong, and most of them are coming back. So now it may be back to tank season again. But I think we're going to be fast again. I'm timing these girls, and I think we got a chance to be really good, really good.
The mix just creates some unbelievable softball. When you have the power to back up the speed and you're stealing bases and you're moving girls around, I'm sure it opens up a whole playbook for the coach that she can do about whatever she wants.
Absolutely. I mean, we had one girl that was 61 of 62 on stolen bases this past year. She got caught once. Stealing 61 bases in softball, I mean, that's insane. Hitting, a lot of home runs, had a lot of girls that, could get it out of the park. And funny enough, we actually had a girl that was supposed to be playing for us that early enrolled at Alabama and started at shortstop for Alabama this past year. So we didn't even get to play with her. And she may be the most gifted athlete I've ever coached. And I've had some good ones around here. We've sent football guys to a lot of places. I think we've got like 25 SEC guys in the last, since 2014 or something like that. She is probably the most gifted athlete I've dealt with. Just unbelievable. And but she graduated early, and that is a weird thing for a spring sport, right? That you don't hear about that often. You hear about it in football. They get done with their senior year and then they early enroll in January. Well, she did it before her senior year, but she knew what she was doing. She was good enough to go down and start at Alabama at shortstop, which is not easy to do. So we did it without her, and she was by far our best home run ball hitter. But the rest of the girls kind of came around with it, and we didn't have one that just did it. We had, I think our top girls, we had two girls at 9, and we had one at 8, a couple at 6. So it was kind of spread out through the team. And the one girl that stole 61 bases, she hit 5 and had never hit a home run before. Okay. And she played really, really high level travel ball. The team she was on last year, the Birmingham Bolts, they won a state champ or a national championship. And she's our speed girl, but she hit 5 home runs, never hit one before until this year. So that was pretty exciting. Yeah.
I'm sure it was. Now, listening to you talk, I mean, you guys have sent players all over the country to play at very high level. Those kids are kind of locked in and know what they want. Now, you've got some others that you're trying to bring along. So keeping kids' attention, getting buy-in from other than D1 recruits. How are you able to do that?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't care what sport you're dealing with, that the success of that all starts with the head coach and what the standard of the program is. And because as a strength coach, you can only go so far without the head coach having stated, and everybody in the entire program from the kids to the coaches understand what the standard is, and if people are willing to uphold the standard. And I'm blessed to work with coaches here that get that. And so it's not an easy thing. And football is probably a little different than we've been talking about softball. It's a little bit different of a deal in that I think in football you still have kids that really just want to run out there on Friday nights, and which is you need volume of kids on a football team. In softball here, these kids grow up playing the game at a real high level. And to be honest with you, they're not going to do everything. Look, our softball program is different than I say that 99% of softball programs in the country. It's a whole different beast because of the way it's run and the accountability that Taylor holds the girls to. So you're not going to, first of all, you won't make the team if you're not bought in. Second of all, you will not stay here if you're not bought in. And if you're kind of lackadaisical about it, you're not going to want to stay here and do all the things that they do. They will be in the weight room at 6 tomorrow morning. They'll be in the weight room at 6 on Monday morning. They work 5 days a week. They did conditioning. They ran some tempos just a couple hours ago. So it is a year-round process. It is not something that you just do in the spring and that kind of thing. It is, we don't have buy-in issues, if that makes sense. Now, what I do have to do is I got to get the girls. I work with our girls 7 through 12. Okay. And I actually work with our girls 7 through 12 all together. I don't separate them. And while it can be challenging to do that, I think it's great because our young girls see those older girls, um, and they know those girls have hoisted a trophy several times. So that's kind of teaching the standard without me even having to say a word, right? I mean, the girls look across the weight room when we're in the weight room and they see girls lifted what in their eyes is impossible weight. And I'll walk over there and I'll say, that's going to be you girls one day. Just stick with it. And they can't really believe it. And so what I do is I look at it as a very long-term thing because I get them in seventh grade. Uh, and the analogy I use is I just dip their toe in the water. I do not want them when they first start, and we had a group, just start here recently. Seventh graders just came up to sixth grade. I don't want them to leave our room tired. I don't want them to leave our room sore. I don't want them to leave our room defeated in any way because I don't want our weight room or our running program to be something that they dread. And so and we'll do things and have some fun with it. For instance, yesterday's Wednesday. Well, our girls automatically know when we lift on Wednesday's Wine Wednesday. What that means is the first 5 minutes they can come into the weight room and we have a gripe session of anything that they want to whine about. They can whine about it, and little things like that I think go a long way in building a place of where they want to come to, and it's fun and it's not just really really tough and hard and I'm sore and all those kind of things. So generally what I do is with the young girls is I teach them, I do everything anybody else does. We do ISO holds and that kind of stuff. Once I kind of get them into our movements, then I simply go on a linear periodization thing. We add 5 pounds when they're ready to add 5 pounds. They add 5 pounds to the bar. I literally never tell them. I never tell them to add weight to a bar. I want them to add the weight, not me. I want them to want to do it and they're confident in it. And I always tell them, if you ain't quite sure, just stay where you were. Just stay there another week. And then, hey, it should be a lot easier next week. Then move up. So I do that. And before long, they're lifting a decent amount of weight. This past summer, I had some eighth graders. We were in the weight room, and my daughter and some of them were pretty strong on trap bar deadlift, and they saw some of the girls deadlifting, and their eyes are just bugging out of their head. And I said, like I said, I went over there and I said, one day that's going to be y'all. And they were like, there's no way. Well, the very next week they asked me, two of the girls said, Coach, do you think we could put a 45 on the bar? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I knew they could do it. They didn't know they could do it. I was like, yes, absolutely. Put it on there. And they got on there and they knocked out 5 reps. And then all of a sudden, a third girl comes over. Well, we had 8 girls hit 135 on a trap bar deadlift for the first time ever. I'd never asked them to go that heavy, but I knew they could do the work off of it. And boom, that's buy-in. I didn't ever make them do it. They wanted to do it because a little while after that, I heard them, and they were trying to they were saying who was going to be the first one to get 2 plates on the bar. Boom, it's done. My work's done. They see it going. So just adding 5 pounds to the bar when they're ready goes a long, long way. My biggest thing I'm trying to get with them is confidence. You know what I mean? Like I want them to know that they can step up to a bar and do whatever weight's on there, not guessing because they don't have the confidence that they need to step up and do, kind of some kind of heavy weight. And to be honest with you, it doesn't matter people aren't in the stands to watch eighth grade. And I don't mean that in a mean way. They're coming to the park when you're a junior and a senior. That's when we're making money right there. When you're in eighth grade, hey, I don't need to know how strong you are. It's not going to make a difference. If you're the best player on the field when you're in eighth grade, you're going to be the best player on the field regardless of if you lift weights or not, right? So I'm looking at it as a long-term thing. After they kind of get going on that and they run its course on just adding 5 pounds, I'm real big on 531 with our girls. I'm a huge believer in that. So shout out to Windler for that. I love it. I absolutely love it because it goes hand in hand with confidence. Okay. Uh, I don't let well, I say that every now and then our girls are good enough now that we will do some singles. We don't have a designated max day or something like that, but on that one, on the day where we go down to one rep with some of my older ones, they'll ask, "Hey, can we do a one rep?" Yeah, sure. And then sometimes I'll say, no, I want my plus reps, right there. But I think the 531 with what we call it a money set. So the plus set at the end, I think that teaches them straining when they have to gut out some reps and they do it over time. They're gutting out more and more reps and they're really, really learning how to tax themselves. And I literally never say anything to them. The only time I'll say anything to them is one of my older girls, and they know, I'll ask, did you leave? Did you empty the tank? And they know what that means. No, they may not have emptied the tank, and they're expected to empty the tank. So I'm a big 531 fan. We use it a lot. We're cycling it right now on a lot of our lifts. So that's kind of the process of what we do, 7 through 12.
That system is just so versatile. You can do whatever you want to with it. You can plug and play exercises. I don't know when he originally came out with that if he understood how many coaches would use it in how many different ways. But yeah, he stumbled on something that really works for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I use it. It's like anything else. I take a little bit of liberty with it. For instance, I will add a set or two in different places according to what it is that I'm looking for and what time of year it is. You can add a set or two, say at 40%, and then one at 60% before you get to the 70 or 75%, and you're basically hitting the whole force velocity curve right there as long as they're lifting it, with great intent. But sometimes maybe deep in the off season or in the off season, I'll add a working set. So before we get to a set, I'll do 2 sets right there. So I'm getting another work set, getting a little bit more volume with it. So I think, like you said, it's very versatile and you can do things with it. But the basis of it is always there, and that plus set is, with young ones especially, is huge at teaching them to strain. And things like with our softball team, I use a 531 with my football kids. I use it with anybody, soccer, I don't care. But with softball in particular, trap bar deadlift is a big, big lift for us. I would imagine that if you asked one of our girls, what is y'all's number one lift, they would probably say trap bar deadlift. I'm a believer in it. I think, are there better lifts? Yeah. Is the conventional better? I'm not getting into that. I know my girls can lift really, really heavy with that, and I can be over there coaching my 7th grade girls and not have to worry about it because my girls know how to lift, and I don't have to worry about them doing something wrong and hurting themselves. But there's a great grip strength demand in it, and I'm a big believer that in softball, baseball, grip strength is a huge thing at getting the bat in the zone. And so we do a lot of trap bar deadlift, and the 531 is absolute gold with the trap bar deadlift. You can work some serious reps in that, and they can empty the tank and really learn to strain. Quick story, this past summer we had, and this is where you kind of know they're getting it, and they like what they're doing. One of our juniors was lifting, and I treat summer as in season for softball because it is in season. They're playing travel ball. And so I think I had 4 sets of 5 at 75%, something like that. And one of our girls, Olivia, came over and said, "Coach, can I do a money set?" And I was like, "Well, are you playing this weekend?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Well, giddy up, let's do it." Uh, and so the fact that she asked, could she do a money set, was freaking awesome in my mind. So I pulled out my phone, and I actually posted this on Twitter, but I pulled my phone out. She had 245 pounds on the bar, I think. And I'm recording it. And while she was doing this, I happened to look over at our middle school girls, and they're watching, and they're just like, "Oh my gosh, she did 245 pounds 24 times." So first of all, you take the 10% reduction off of or whatever, but she hit 24 reps. That's no longer 75% for one. But as soon as she got done with the set, she immediately laid down on the ground. Gave it up, right? And I went over and checked on her. And then I went straight to my middle school girls, and I said, "One day that's going to be y'all." And so that's a great thing. Those girls get to see those older ones do things like that. It teaches the strain for me. You know what I'm saying? They're learning what the expectation is, and what's expected of them when they get older. So it's a good deal.
Now, you were talking about adding sets here and there. We'll do that some here. We'll do a 5x5-3-1. I don't know if you've ever incorporated that in it.
Now tell me about it.
Okay, so you're going to do your, let's do a 5-week. So you're going to do your 60, your 70, and your 80%. So your 80% you're going to do for 3 sets. Three sets, gotcha. 3 sets of 5.
Right.
That gives you 5 sets, and falling somewhere in that chart of where you want to be. So where you added on to the beginning with a lot of these football boys, we'll add it onto the end.
Just hit more volume.
Yeah, at a higher weight. Now you could rotate that if you wanted to. So one cycle you could do it on the bottom side and get your dynamic work. On the next cycle you could put it on the top end and get your strength work. So, which, talking about that, we had talked a little bit yesterday, and I had tried this before, but I wanted to see how you liked it. You said you did the 5-3-1, you did a 3-week wave, and then your 4th week you did your dynamic speed work. How's that been working out for you?
It's been okay. To be honest with you, with our, it serves a little bit. First of all, in high school, if you're teaching in school, you don't really need deload weeks. You get so many breaks here and there and whatever that those weeks serve as a deload. But I program that would be what would be my deload week, regardless whether I was doing a 5-3-1 or whatever. I like to program on 4-week cycles. So you can kind of deload in week 3, you can deload in week 4, but I treat the deload as a speed week, regardless of what scheme I'm doing and those kind of things. So that's one area where we're working towards getting better with our girls. I think we've built a solid strength program. Our girls are strong, and they're proud of it. They're not ashamed that they're strong. They're very well known in our school. I put them all over Twitter. That's another thing I do is I use Twitter as a little bit of a motivator. I put them out there doing a lot of things and a lot of heavyweight and all that. So if it adds a little gas to the fire, then good. But the dynamic work is something that we're starting to get better and better at. I'm hopefully, cross our fingers, I'm about to get 6 perch units. So I'll be able to take that to a new level, I think. So I like it. I do like it. You come off the 1 rep, or your 1+ or however you decide to do that last week, the 3rd week with the 1. I like the thought of it. You kind of rejuvenate their body just a little bit, and you're really working some speed, strength, and those qualities in that, and then you kind of reset, going back through some strength work. So I like it. I think it's been good for us.
Well, let me ask you one more question about 531, and then we can talk about some other stuff, which I also know you got a Simply Faster article that's probably going to cover all this stuff in that too. So if anybody wants to see that. But do you stagger your weeks? So will your trap bar deadlift be a 5 week while your squat be a 3 week while your bench be a 1 week, and then flip them through so not everything's the same? Or do you just keep everything the same? You're in a 5 week, you're in a 3 week, you're in a 1 week.
That's a little bit of a loaded question, but it depends. It depends on who. I only use the 5-3-1 on certain lifts. I'll be honest with you. So I bilateral squat. Our football team. We do not back squat. I have safety squat bars. We will use those both with the handles and with Hatfield style. We will front squat as well. But we also do a lot of lunging. I'm a big believer in the safety squat bar lunge. We got some football kids that can freaking move some weight. People make a big deal out of bilateral squat, and I got kids that can reverse lunge what your kids back squatting and you're simply back squatting them because you're supposed to back squat them. I don't know. I think there's a lot of things that you can do to build strength and build them in things that they actually, or in the gait cycle, which they play sports in, and those kind of things. So I do not use the 5-3-1 on like a lunge. I'm careful with it with a single leg, simply because it's not just one leg. Both leg, you're doubling your amount of time under the bar. So I'm real careful with that. Don't do a lot of plus sets with that unless it's real low reps, 1 to 3. And I know the intensity that's on the bar and what they can do. I'm not going to sit there and go 12 reps on a reverse lunge and then you got to turn over the other side, right? And I don't do it with things like I'm real big into bench or push pressing, especially with our football kids. I put a bigger emphasis on the push press than I do with the bench press. I'll use the 5-3-1 with the bench press. I don't do it as much with the push press, simply because of getting back into that rack and how much volume you can handle bringing the bar back down. We had 34 guys going into this season that had push press at 225 or more. So to me, that's pretty good. But bringing all that weight back down into the rack that many times, I don't know. So I use it on certain lifts, if that makes sense. And even with our girls, they literally never bilateral squat. Their bilateral lifts are clean pull. I do have I've got 4 girls right now that are cleaning because they want to learn how to clean. So if they want to do it, I'm all in on it. So they clean pull or clean, and they trap bar deadlift. Other than that, it's all unilateral work or 2 points of contact, however you want to call it. We do. Right now, we're real into rear foot elevated split squat. They will do a lot of safety squat bar reverse lunge. I think that's a great movement for them. We do a lot of lateral lunges. So on all those things, we don't necessarily get into the 5-3-1. So I will program, even in the same cycle, certain lifts have the 5-3-1 scheme into it, and then other ones don't, if that makes sense.
Well, and that's what makes the program so unique. You can pick and pull and do what you want, and put a repetition method in here or whatever the case may be. So moving off that, because I think we covered that pretty extensively, which I think we both enjoy it, but I understand not everybody is 5-3-1 maniacs. But shoulder strength and mobility in athletes. You've got volleyball players, you have baseball players, softball players, you got a lot of rotational athletes, a lot of shoulder involvement, creating a good shoulder and back in an athlete, especially with the environment we're seeing today that kids are living in. How do you go about creating that?
Well, the very first thing is the vast majority of high school kids simply need strength. They just need strength. So before I get real specialized with any sport, but that kind of goes back to knowing the demands of the sport and all that. But before I get real specialized with anything, they just need to get stronger. And look, our softball girls bench press. I had volleyball today in the weight room, or yesterday in the weight room. They bench press. They also overhead press. Now, some people may shoot me, but if you can coach it right, there's nothing wrong with it, right? There's nothing wrong at all with any lift. It's how the lift is being done and all that. So um, that's my first thing is get them strong. Now we do, and I'll be honest with you, with our softball team in particular, our head coach does a great job with arm care. In season, I don't have to worry about anything in the weight room. They have weighted balls, they do band work. She's got a system that she uses, and I've looked at, and it's freaking money. So she does a lot of that stuff in season, and I'll hit it a lot in the off season, whether that's banded work, 90-degree rotator cuff stuff, doing cars or pails and rails, and mobility work, before or during a session and all that. We will hit those things, but I also think that just because you're a throwing athlete doesn't mean you don't need more and better hip mobility. So they hit those things. I do a lot of shoulder work with football because, football's awful on shoulders, right? But one thing that you can do that's about as good as anything is do a lot of pulling, do a lot of rowing, do a lot of chin ups, so we're going to pull a whole bunch. So I think a lot of boxers can be checked without having to get specialized in a whole bunch of things. And I think people are too rushed to think that high school kids need to be doing some kind of workout that they see on TikTok or on Instagram. At least for me, the vast majority of the ones I see, they just need to be stronger. They're like wet spaghetti noodles, right? So we're going to do the things that get them stronger. We do dedicated core work with anti-rotation things. Girls do med ball work every time they're in there, but they're still bench pressing, they're still overhead pressing. And we've gone to, and I'll give them a choice. One of my senior girls, she would rather dumbbell bench press. All right, dumbbell bench press. I'm good with that. So she dumbbell bench press. I don't care. I mean, she's pressing. You know what I'm saying? Now I got one girl in 10th grade. She is a monster on bench press. She's got a 170-pound bench press max right now in 10th grade, which is freaking difficult to do as a sophomore female. So if they really don't want to do something, I'll give them options. But that also gives them a little bit of buy-in with stuff, So, long story short, I do things with sports, what they need more of. Yeah, absolutely. But the meat of it, 90% of it is all the same. Our girls could go in the weight room with our boys and be just fine and know every movement that they're doing and everything's good.
Now, I kind of mentioned it earlier. You got an article getting ready to come out with Simply Faster. What got you into writing a few articles?
That's my first real article. I did what do they call it? The free Fast Friday 5 or question thing, but that was an easy deal where they asked me. Writing is not in my comfort zone, and I kind of cover that in the article itself. I don't know. I think it's going to be published, so hopefully it is. They have it, and they said it's okay. And I kind of cover a lot of the stuff that we're covering here. But basically, what happened was I put something out. I'll be honest with you, I don't even really remember. I think it was kind of talking about how I teach our softball girls to go in the weight room and really strain. Because I have people call and ask or text me, and how are you getting your girls to push that dang hard in the weight room? And so I put out a couple of things about how we do linear periodization. We use the 5-3-1 scheme and all that. And I think Mark Hoover commented and said, you need to expand this into an article. And I made a joke about it, like I ain't no writer, and blah blah. Made a joke, and And I'll be honest with you, one of our softball girls is also a trainer for our football program. She's wanting to go into athletic training. And I saw her that night at our game. And every time I looked at her, every time I saw her, I just like, it was almost like she was, you're a hypocrite because one thing I'm really working with them on is don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone. You have got to push yourself, and you've got to be willing to walk up to the edge of the cliff and dangle your foot a little bit. You got to be willing to get out of your comfort zone. And I also talk to them. I see this in really all athletes, but I cover it with our softball team in that article. Young people, well, people in general, honestly, it's not just young people, it's adults too, will use uh, humor, laughing, and those kind of things as a defense mechanism. When they get uncomfortable, they'll make a joke or they'll start laughing, and nervous laughter and those kind of things. Well, I did both of those things that day, and I looked at every time I looked at her, I was just like, man, I have to at least try it. I have to try to write the article. So I did. They have it right now, and they're probably butchering it up and all that kind of thing. So we'll see. We'll see when it comes out if it's any good or not.
I'm sure it'll be fine, but like you were alluding to, you only get one shot at this thing, so you might as well expand your bounds a little bit and see what's out there.
Well, I still ain't comfortable with it. So I would much rather sit down and do what we're doing, just talk.
Yeah, and you get the information out there maybe a little quicker, and you don't have to worry about punctuation and quotation marks. And then if you use somebody else's stuff, citations, there's everything that goes into that.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it made you think a little bit and dig into your program a little better and possibly make you elaborate in words to try to explain to somebody. Maybe it'll help you in your coaching. Who knows?
Hopefully. We'll see. That's always the goal, right? Get better.
Now, the other thing I was going to ask you about, and this has nothing to do with strength and conditioning, but you said you are a avid reader on military books. So what's your time period? What do you like to read the most about?
Ooh, that's tough. I'm a big military history guy. I really enjoy. So, long story short, I was going to join the military. That was what I was going to do when I graduated high school. I wanted to be an Army Ranger, and the good Lord had other things for me. Football ended up working out. Uh, Second time around, I was going to enlist after I graduated from college, and then end up, maybe going into officer candidate school after I'd served a couple of years. And coaching's the only other thing that I'd given thought to, and I tried that, and here I am. So I've always been interested in the military. I'm extremely grateful for those that serve. And it's just it's a real passion of mine to read about. So time periods. When I first started reading, I was like any other kid reading. I ain't reading. I'm not reading. I'm out. Well, in my junior year, I think, of college, I had to do a book report, and I'm trying to figure out what book I'm going to read. Well, somehow I don't even remember now. It's been 20 something years ago, but I landed on a book called Marine Sniper by Charles Henderson, and it was for a class. And the reason I kind of got toward that was because it was for a class called America in the '60s. It was a history class, and I didn't want to do hippie stuff and whatever. I found the book, and it was about Carlos Hathcock. And Carlos Hathcock, if you're in the Marine Corps or you know anything about snipers, is a legend, an absolute legend. And he was in the Vietnam War. He had 93 confirmed kills back then. People that are listening to this are probably familiar with Chris Kyle. From his book and movie, The American Sniper. That movie and book actually referenced Carlos Hathcock. It was about him and the things that he did. I don't know if you've ever watched the movie with Tom Berenger and it's Sniper or whatever, when he shoots the guy through the scope. Well, Carlos Hathcock actually did that. a lot of things in that movie were based off of him, and that's what really kind of got me started. So I did a lot of reading on Vietnam, and I have since then. But I've covered everything, man. I've gone all the way up. In the '80s, there wasn't a lot going on besides the Cold War, but you did have Grenada and some things like that. I'm pretty big into special operations stuff. So you had some things in the '80s, and then you got everything from the '90s and above in the Middle East, and then I've kind of gone back into World War II. I've done some Civil War. I'm reading a book right now called The Liberator, which is about a guy in World War II. I don't know a lot about the Italian campaign in World War II, and this book is about that. So I just I look, I literally read every single day. I don't go to bed without reading. Why that is, I don't know. I would rather read than watch TV or a movie or any of that kind of thing. And I do. I every now and then I need a little break. If I get, you know, a while back, I was on a real big Civil War kick, especially with Stonewall Jackson. Read a lot about him, and some of those books are 800 pages long. There's a lot of information in it. So if I need a break, I'll read some fiction as well. So I'll weave in and out.
Hathcock, he wore the white feather and kind of taunted the Vietnam, and I want to say they had a hefty bounty on his head. And at
Absolutely, Russia sent a sniper to get him, and
yeah,
he ended up getting him.
and at one time he had the longest kill, if I remember right. It in the book talks about him how he had to crawl in there to it and
He did.
had to avoid
Yeah,
snakes and
some of the stuff that he did was insane, man. The one you're talking about, he ended up crawling on his belly for 3 days just to get in line for a shot, and was face to face with an eyelash viper and this, that, and the other, and would just eat nothing but cheese crackers for 5 days in the field, and I mean, just insane stuff. I could tell you, don't get me on this because this would take forever.
no, and I'm sure as much as you've read, you can point out a bunch more stories. But the other thing you said was you enjoy cooking, so we'll get off books and on to cooking. What do you like to cook?
There's not much I don't like to cook, or I'm not like being egotistical or whatever, but I'm pretty good. Like, I can cook, and not just like grill. I'm talking about like I can cook in the kitchen. Cooking's never been hard for me. Like, it's never been. My dad cooked, so it's kind of one of those deals where it was a natural thing for me to cook, I guess. But nobody really ever taught me to cook. I just kind of knew how to do it. I don't know how. Um, it just never has never been a difficult thing for me, and I don't really understand why it's difficult for anybody, quite honestly. I think cooking is really two areas. It's temperature control and what flavors go with what. And if you get those two things, then you can pretty much do anything you want. Generally people cook too high heat or too low a heat, and then they don't understand what flavors go together, what spices go together, and all that. If you get those two things, you can. I don't ever cook with a recipe. It drives my wife nuts. She'll say, "Hey, look at this, or look at this recipe," and I'll look at it and I'll go, "Got it," and then I'll just go do my own thing. Based loosely on what I read real quick, but I don't know. It's just never been a difficult thing for me.
Well, I know we've been on here quite a while. We'll hop on to a couple more training questions, and then I'll let you enjoy your evening. But the one Q&A that you had on Simply Faster that I read got into some speed training and acceleration training. You were really big on the acceleration work. What are you doing down there with your athletes? I mean, I know you got to hit top speed and do all the things that you need to do to create athletes, but as far as your acceleration work goes, what are you doing with your athletes down there?
Well, I mean, we're probably no different than anybody else. I mean, I will say this is, so if somebody out there is listening that can do something like this, I think that the towed running market is not good for regular people. You either have sleds, which are a burden to deal with, weight on and off of them and this, that, and the other. Or you go up into having to spend $2,500 for a product that, for one thing. There's no in between, you know what I'm saying? So we do a lot of towing sleds. We run a lot of hills. I got a really good hill behind our football stadium. It's only about 20 yards long, but it's fairly steep. It's not too steep. They can sprint up it, so they get in pretty good shapes with that. Um, we'll do some banded work and things like that as well. Um, we do acceleration from all stances, and that's where I think one thing I do, and this kind of goes back to your comment of knowing the sports that you're working with. Um, get a feel for what they do stance wise and how they need to be able to accelerate and work those things. Um, with football, they have to be able to accelerate from an athletic position. They have to be able to accelerate from an athletic position while shuffling. They have to be able to. There's a lot of they got to, athletic position lateral. They have to be able to turn 180 degrees and or 90 degrees and end up 180 degrees. So there's a lot of different things that they have to be doing. They come from a staggered stance. They come from down. So look at the sport that you're coaching and how do they need to be able to accelerate and work those things. I'm kind of a believer in natural movement. I think the human body knows how to move. I coach what happens after the first step much more than I do the first step. People term it the plow step, and however you want to go with that. But get them in those positions and have them do it. Another one is accelerating from a jog. It happens all the time in football, all the time. I mean, if you're a receiver and you run your route and the quarterback's working the other side of the field and another guy catches it, you're jogging and then all of a sudden you accelerate to go and get out in front of him to block. Those kind of things happen all the time. If the ball's picked off and you're an offensive lineman, you're jogging, then all of a sudden it's picked off. I got to accelerate from that movement. So get them in the positions of and have them accelerate from all those different places, work at it, and work what happens after the first step as much as you do the first step itself. Try to get them in good position, striking back underneath the hip as good as you can. I'm also a believer – this isn't track. You can't. Acceleration is in top end mechanics. A lot of times they're not going to look like what a track person does when they're running the 100. It's just not going to happen. It's you're in a lane. A lot of it is you against you, how you're running. Yeah, you get some stimulus from racing and those kind of things, but you're not having to make decisions and turn and stop and those kind of things. So the patterns are never going to look the same. Work it from an output standpoint and then work it from a sport standpoint.
We'll kind of wrap up with this question here and see what you think. But figuring out what rabbit to chase, speed, strength. I know you're getting both of them, trying to get them both to come at the same time, kind of like a conjugate system. But when you're viewing it, where do you think your athletes need the most work?
That's a loaded question, dude.
I'm not trying to load the questions. I really not. I just whatever your opinion is, it is.
Well, here's the thing. I think everybody's different. I'll kind of put it back like that. I think every kid's different. A great example of that. We had a kid last year. He's a freshman right now at Tennessee football. Played corner for us. He came out of the womb fast. You know what I'm saying? Like, kid was just unbelievably fast. But if you put him underneath a squat bar, I mean, it looked like he was about to break in half, right? He got shoved around out at corner. Kind of got he couldn't use the boundary as an extra defender because he wasn't strong enough to brace against a receiver and push him toward the boundary, right? So that kid needed strength work. Like, he needed strength work way more than he needed speed work. Okay. And then there's other kids that are strong and they have power. And so what do they need most? So let's focus a little bit more on speed work with them. There's times where when I'm timing, and we ran today, as a matter of fact, with our football program, we sprint on Thursdays. That's our day to go top end. Some people look at me like I'm crazy, but that's the day I'm priming them. They're CNS for the next day game wise. And we use sprinting as much for hamstring health as anything else, but there's times where I may not have some of our fast guys sprint. If they have done some things in practice that week, and the week before they had a long touchdown run or something like that, they may not sprint. They may not need it. If I don't think they need to do it. So that whole thing, I think, I individualize as much as I can. I focus on certain things. With our football program, I actually program differently according to some positions. Our bigs do different things than our skill kids do. And our mids sometimes do the bigs work, sometimes they do the skill work. And softball is much the same way. My daughter is just dumb strong. She's 15 years old. She's 375-pound trap bar deadlifter at 15 years old. Can just flat move weight. She needs to get faster. She needs to get faster. So, we work on that. So I think there's a fine balance. I think everybody needs to run fast, period. I don't care how fast you are, whether you make speed gains or not. It's great for health. It's great for your central nervous system. So we're always going to do all of it, but I may focus a little bit more with certain people on certain things. I'll give you a great example of this. A couple of years ago, we had a receiver that his top end speed was legit. Like he was fast. But if you time him in a 40, he was going to have an average time for recruiters. Okay. His time was just going to be, And when I say that, he's in the SEC now. So for SEC programs, he was kind of, I don't know how fast he is. This guy's faster. Let's take him. Well, before our boys in May, I always sit down with our recruitable kids or any kid that's going to a camp. And I sat down with him and I said, don't run a 40. Don't do it. Don't run a 40. And the reason I knew that is I knew his 30 to 40 split was going to be freaking outrageous. But I also knew his 0 to 10 was where he was lacking speed, is in his 0 to 10. So he goes to LSU and they make him run a 40. They don't offer him. I called Tommy Moffitt, by the way, and I said, Tommy, will you look up what this kid ran for me? Y'all didn't offer him. And y'all made him run a 40 when I told him not to. So sure enough, he ran like a 4. I don't know. Whatever. It doesn't matter. So they don't offer him. 2 weeks later, he goes to Alabama and they don't make him run a 40. But they put a GPS on him. And, they do 7-on-7. They do the whole camp and that kind of thing. Well, he gets an invitation to Nick Saban's office. And if you're in camp and you get an invitation in Nick Saban's office, you're getting offered. That's why you're going up there. And so as soon as Coach Saban came in the office, how you doing? And he said, you know how fast you ran today? And he said, no, sir. He said, you hit 22 miles an hour in 7-on-7. And they offered him. So, that kid I knew had top end speed. What he needed was more force through and to learn how to project better in the 0 to 10. So we spent literally all fall doing that. He ran very little top end work. We would do it some, but he had a lot of receiving yards. He was a punt or a kick returner, so he hit some pretty fast times. We did a lot of acceleration work, and by the time November got here, when we were going into playoffs, he was hitting his best times in acceleration stuff. So that was just a way of individualizing as much as you can and knowing what your athletes need and trying to do your best to try to help them be as successful as they can be.
Well, you answered that question pretty much how I thought you was going to, so I had the next question ready, and you answered it on the way. Are you having those conversations with kids like, you're incredibly fast. we need you to be stronger. So now you got buy-in from the kid, like, okay, he recognizes my speed, so now I got to put more time into the weight room. But you kind of answered that as you went along, so it kind of took away my thunder.
Look, if you're honest with kids and you build a relationship with them and they know that you have their best interest, you're just trying to help them be as good as they can be. I tell our kids, you have a potential tank and it's just like a water heater tank. And we are trying to fill that tank all the way to the top. And as soon as we fill it up, guess what? The tank expands. So now we're just trying to fill it up again. And as soon as they know that you want them to be as good as they can be, and they're real interested in the sport and they're willing to do what it takes to maximize their potential, then they're going to be willing to do, pretty much what you ask them to do. But you got to build that trust with them.
Well, Coach, I appreciate all the time. I hope I didn't keep you too long, but thanks for coming on and answering all the questions. I had just a great time asking even some of the off questions, the military history and all that. I don't get to do that a whole lot anymore.
No, we can talk about that anytime you want to. If you want me to put you on some books, I will. Even some fiction stuff. I read quite a bit of fiction too. So anytime you need book recommendations, I can't help, on Twitter, I people will say what books you need to read. I'll put this book out there for every single person that's listening to this. Go get the book. I don't care if you're a reader or not. Get the audio version of it. There's a book called Fearless by Eric Blehm, Blehm. Go get the book, and you can just thank me later. It's one of the best books that you'll ever read or listen to. It's unbelievable, and it's not just military. It's about a military person, but you want to talk about perseverance, just off the freaking charts. It is hugely inspirational, and it's just a great book. So I think it's a book that anybody that's listening to this, I'll be honest with you, I thought so much of it. I made my wife read it, and she loved it, absolutely loved it. So I think anybody would like it, and anybody wants any more book recommendations, just hit me up and I'll let you know.
All right, Coach. Well, I'll have to look into it and see if I can find it. Sometimes the fiction's nice to get away from all the training books and all the nonfiction and textile books that we end up reading.
And that's why I do it. It's just a little bit of a break, a rest. It gets you in a whole different, different place. It's kind of what people do with movies. I just do it through reading. I'm not a big movie guy at all. And in fact, that's kind of one of my things. People know that I think the majority of movies that people like are stupid. So I do that with books, So anyway.
All right, Coach. Well, continue success down there, and thank you again.
All right. I appreciate you having me on. Thanks for what you do.